Okay, so a little bit of background and experience on our speaker today, Adam Lewinberg. He's the president of Postal Advocate, the only mail audit and recovery firm in the US and Canada. We manage a portfolio of over 160,000 pieces of mailing equipment for the largest US companies. He speaks and teaches nationally on mail savings and industry trends. He is the former industry co-chair for the Boston Postal Customer Council, and he is a member of the Mail Systems Management Association with certifications in CMDSS and MDC. He's also a featured writer for Mailing Systems Technology magazine. He also worked for one of the largest mailing vendors for over 17 years as the Director of National Sales for Presort, tabletop inserters, addressing hardware and software, and green offerings. He was one of the top 5 account managers nationally working with some of the nation's largest accounts. Over to you, Adam.
Thanks, Doris. So today we get to talk about outsourced mail services, and we may call them different things. We call them mail houses, printers that provide mail services. But we're going to talk about this category because it is one of the largest areas to reduce cost around mail, and we're going to talk about the reasons why. So what we're going to cover today is how do you gain visibility? And this to me is the #1 most important thing about outsourced mail. How do you gain visibility to what's going on today? Then from that, you can then optimize the way you're sending your mail. And then you can optimize your mail service providers because you now have that visibility for the future. So most mail in the United States is production mail. And production mail are things that are done in large plant operations that are getting discounted postage rates. Most of this mail volume today is being outsourced. And so if we look at the production mail volumes, I would make an estimate that says that of items that qualify as either first-class automation mail or qualify as marketing mail, I would say 70 to 80% of that volume is outsourced to a third party. And the reason this is happening is, and it's evolved and it's increased with much higher percentages being outsourced as time has moved on. Sorry about that, everyone. So the reasons for this is the USPS rules have gotten more difficult. Automation discounts, IMB certifications, seamless acceptance. It's been difficult for companies to sort of keep up with all of those changes. There's less expertise in mail internally. In many organizations, people have retired, or new people aren't going into the mail services as an industry. And so a lot of organizations just don't have the expertise internally to manage it. And there's improved levels of automation externally. So what outside mail services can do in many cases is more than people could afford to do in-house. The technology at the high end has allowed them to make themselves more competitive to outsource it than in many cases doing it in-house. The key issues is this is the least understood category with the lowest level of visibility. Most people just don't have the visibility, which we'll dive into, but the highest area for potential overspending. So we're going to talk about those issues. So the key challenges to outsource print and mail service is this lack of visibility. We'll go into more reasons on this. But if you were to gain the visibility, you would see that there's huge variability in the rates that people pay for services and fees. There's inconsistent levels of detail on invoices. So if you compare one service provider versus another, you're going to find completely different levels of detail on the invoices. And then often cases that the people who are managing these categories or managing the vendor relationships either have a lack of internal knowledge or the time or the resources to be able to dive in to see are they getting the best levels of service. So let's talk about this lack of visibility. This is the biggest issue. So if you think about it, the reason that there's such a lack of visibility is the spends are fragmented. So you could be using a different provider to do statements or invoices and transactional print documents, like from an accounts receivable group. You might have different advertising-based products and projects done in marketing or done in marketing or a development or an annual fund. If you're a college, university, or a hospital, they'll have certainly different marketing-based groups that are not tied together typically. Customer service may be doing announcements or informational projects. Internal staff mailings, there could be, if you're a huge organization, there could be human resource mailings that are being done. So we work with a lot of organizations that have that issue, plus the difficulty of what if they have multiple locations, they have different divisions, they've done different acquisitions, and there's no one central person in many cases overseeing all of those relationships. And that causes this lack of visibility. So We have a process to gain visibility inside an organization that we can recommend you can do on your own, or we certainly could help you with it. But we're going to tell you the basic premise of it. The basic premise is most mailings that are done, like if we said, like, give us a listing of all your outsourced providers, most people just won't know who those are, right? They were like, we don't know who we use. The good news is most outsourced mail is the postage for those outsourced mail is funded by permits that are managed directly by the client or your organization. And so you'll have an account set up with the United States Postal Service for those. So what we do is we go straight to accounts payable and we say, give us an export from your accounts payable system of the mailings in which are being done, or of the spends directly to the United States Postal Service. And those might show up as USPS, United States Postal Service, Postmaster, Post Office. Every company, codes those differently as vendor names. And so, from there, we'll look at for the largest expenses on those. And then we'll reach out to the largest. So from those, we'll get copies of some invoices and we'll see what departments are generating those. And then we'll go, and if that doesn't give us the answers, we'll go directly to the largest departments of accounts receivable, marketing, customer service, and human resources to see how are they handling their biggest mailings. And then from the visibility now to who the mailing vendors are, we'll reach out directly to those vendors to see, do they have web portals? Can they provide more details? Are there, to the invoices and the spends, can they provide reports to what the activities have been over periods of time? And then we'll go to procurement to see if there are contracts in place with these vendors, or was it just an RFP, or maybe through a third party these providers were being used, to see what is the relationship. And from this process, we found you can build the visibility to what is going on across your organization around outsourced mail spends. The invoice detail issue. So below are two invoices from the same company that used two separate providers, and one provider gave the level of invoice that you see on the left, which says for this job it was $85,000, for that job it was $500, for that job it was $5,000, and this job, for the check stock that they ordered was $35,000. So they gave a bill for $127,000 with very little detail on anything that happened inside that job. Another vendor that same provider uses, that same company uses, gives perfect visibility. And so for every function of it, so for the different prints, for the different, inserting, preparation, and there are more categories in this. This is just a snippet from it. But you can see it should be a requirement of these providers to get you the level of detail on the right so you can actually manage and measure what people are doing. So even if they can't provide you that level of detail on an invoice, they should be able to provide it through a web portal or emailed as a backup detail report. You should not accept that you're going to be able, that you can live with the level on the left. And it should be at the job level. If you have a contract with that mailing vendor for specific fees, and you charge this fee for this and this fee for that, they should be able to break it out at that line item detail on every invoice, and that should be an expectation. But you'll see the more you look at mail bills, that's just not the way they typically are done. Service fee variability. So you'll find from one provider to another huge variations in what they charge for things like job setup, or for folding and inserting, or for image storage and retention, or every single category. You'll see huge variations, and the reason for that is, frankly, nobody ever compares them. And so occasionally someone does an RFP at a single point in time for some services or for a specific job, but it's not typically a continual process. So the reasons for these types of variabilities are, was the job put out to bid, or was it an add-on project to an existing provider? Typically, people have some relationship and they say, oh, can you do this? Oh, can you do this? And they get a quote, and frankly, people don't check it against others, and they end up just paying those rates. So does the vendor have a master service agreement for continual work at specific rates? In many cases, larger relationships will have that. The question is, how often is that checked against the market? What was the quantity and frequency of the mailing? Is it a one-off, or is it something that's done on a regular basis? What were the data processing charges? And we're going to go into more detail on this, but this can be a huge area. What type of stock and paper is used? Can you compare that? How is it printed? What type of printing technology was used? Is it color, black and white? How is the piece prepared? Could it have been automated? Was it handwork? Is there high levels of personalization? All those things add to cost. Was it mailed, and what level of postal automation was used? Were third-party services used for pre-sorting, mail forwarding, or shipping? And what was needed with the data besides mailing? Like, did it need emailing, texting, or faxing, document storage, and web presentment? So as you can see, with all these different categories is a difficulty comparing jobs, and most organizations have little control of this because they have no way of standardizing this. So what we've created is a process that says for every mailing, we want to put it into one of these main categories. And then we have subcategories of these, and we'll go through these categories in a second. But the important part is every line item on an invoice needs to be logged against this. So you can understand, so you can compare one project to another. And then you can maintain, if the data is maintained over periods of time, you can compare vendors and service levels. You can benchmark the rates for further negotiations. You can see when things go above thresholds to see what needs to be paid attention to. So the beauty of this model is 95% of all the spends that you're going to get on a mailhouse invoice are going to fall into one of these categories. So let's just go through them real quick. So you have the material, like you have the paper, the envelopes, the pre-printed stock. You have data processing. So you have to receive those data files and turn them into their final version. You have to run it through some sort of mail automation software program that, meets the post office requirements and allows you to get postal discounts. You have to print the pages, and how are you going to print them? You have to do mail preparation, run it through folders and inserters, tabbing, inkjetting, hand processing. Then you have the postage cost, or the postage, even if it's handled on your own permits, they should be reporting the postage costs of your mailings. You have email. What's the cost to divert things to email, to send via email? You have transportation, moving mail closer to its final destination to reduce postage costs, especially important around marketing mailings. You have data storage for image creation, storage, retrieval, backup, and then you have other miscellaneous charges. And those other charges should typically be, should be in no more than 5 or 10%. Everything else should be covered in the items above. And you can see where we view these as highest to lowest expense categories. So 3 core areas of savings I want you to think about are postage, printing, and image creation and storage and presentment. So these are 3 areas where you can have a lot of impact on changes on costs. So let's talk about postage. Some of you are very familiar with postage discounting. Some of you don't know that much about it. So I'm going to go for the next 2 slides. I'm just going to talk about postage because I think it's one of the biggest categories of costs of mailings. And so I think it's important to make sure everybody has an understanding of it. So if you want to mail a 1-ounce letter, it's 55 cents if you buy a stamp at the post office. If you run it through a postage meter, it's 51 cents. If you use a pre-sort service to come pick up your mail, and a lot of outsourced mail services use pre-sort services for some of your mailings, it's for first-class mail, it's 43 to 46 cents. If they automate a first-class mailing internally, the rates are 39.8 to 45 cents. If it's marketing mail, so it's basically generic in content, it is 26 to 30 cents. And if you're lucky enough to be a nonprofit sending marketing mail, you get rates of 14 to 18 cents. Okay, and the reason that as things get heavier, the rates go up, but depending on the service levels, for heavier items like first-class automation mailing and pre-sorts, up to 3.5 ounces goes at the same rate as the 1-ounce piece, versus if you did it by hand or through manual means. And with marketing mail, you get the bigger the item is, the bigger the discounts are. So first-class mail, the difference is it has to be personalized in correspondence. So anything that you send as an invoice, a check, a confirmation statement, anything that's unique and different from one customer to another has to go as first-class mail. Marketing mail is everyone's basically getting the same message outside, besides some basic personalization. So maybe you can throw in a customized name and address. Maybe you could throw in like a specific field that is a generic field, like you're interested in, like if you're a college, you're interested in business, you're interested in something else. That could be still considered a marketing mailing. But if I put statement detail in that said, a balance owed or a specific account number or something like that, then it has to go first class. So we need to push service providers for the highest level of automation. So inside these ranges, inside these 39.8 to 45, 25.9 to 30.4, let's talk about what causes that, because this is some of the biggest areas that you can impact in savings. So real quick, let's take first-class mail for a sec. So inside first-class mail automation, the differences in these things, 5-digit AADC, mixed AADC, pre-sorted. What that means is 5-digit means I have 150 pieces going to a 5-digit zip code, like 90210, like the show. If I don't have 150 pieces going to a 5-digit zip code, Do I have 150 pieces going to a grouping of 3-digit zip codes, like 902, 904, and 906? And the post office has set a schematic of these groupings of 3-digit zip codes, and that gets the AADC rate, Automated Area Distribution Center. And then everything else gets, in an automated mailing, gets the mixed AADC rate. So you can see a huge difference, 39.8 to 45 cents. And then obviously as weight goes up, pre-sorted are for pieces that you don't get any pre-sort. It's basically manually pre-sorted, but basically this is just a rate structure that most people use to charge the client a higher rate, even though they're running it through an automation service themselves. Marketing mail is basically the same. And if you look over here at 5-digit AADC and mixed AADC, it's basically the same. The difference with marketing mail is if you have huge volume, you can qualify for carrier routes. And what carrier routes means is you have a certain amount of pieces going into your local postal carrier's walk sequence of their route. And so on top of these discounts, these densities that we gave, you know that John Jones, I mean, basically the post office calculated that Route 123 in Wayland, Massachusetts, there are 78 pieces that we have going into that carrier's route inside that 5-digit zip code, and then there's extra discounts. And also, if I can move mail closer to the end user, so the post office for marketing mail offers extra discounts if you can move the mail to the destination network distribution center or the destination sectional center facility. They give extra, like 2 cents to 2.4 cents discounts for moving your mail closer to that final destination. And so these things are important to get extra rates. So the reason that it's important to bring this up is there's the possibility to have huge savings on your mailings based on what class of mail, whether it's first class or marketing mail, how dense your mailings can be, how many pieces you have going to the area so you can push to these lower rates, and then how much you can move mail closer to its end destination. So the way to do that is you either use third-party pre-sort services, in-house software where you process one job at a time. Larger mail service providers can commingle jobs in the software itself. And so what that means is, one job has 70 pieces, another job has 500 pieces, another job has 1,000 pieces. When you start combining all those jobs into single print streams, everyone can qualify for more pieces going to a certain area, giving better rates for everyone. Marketing mail, there's third-party forwarding services where that you hire and they basically forward the mail to each of these destination sectional center facilities. And then some larger, outsourced mail providers have their own transportation departments, and because their volumes are so high, they have daily, loads to the different sectional center facilities, and they can get higher percentages directly without having to offload it to a third party. All of those things are important when you're calculating, what service you're using, because they can offer different types of postage rates based on their level of automation. Printing. So the second biggest cost area. The technology that they use to print can have a big impact on cost. Are they using cut sheets, roll feed? Do they have big, huge roll printers that cut the cost of paper? Are they laser printing, inkjetting them? Are they doing them color or monochrome? Is there print suppression technology that can be used to move more documents to email and web presentment? Can jobs be presented together versus independent jobs? So it can maybe lower the print cost. Are discounts offering for duplex, or do you have the same image cost, whether it's simplex or duplex? There's also really kind of exciting, excuse me guys, I needed to turn off that phone system. There's also other discounts for these new virtual printers. So as people are working from home or in smaller offices, it doesn't make sense. Like, one of the biggest hangups for people using outsourced providers is the setup fees. It's expensive. Like, if you wanted to do a 300-piece mailing and you want to use an outsourced provider, they were going to charge you a couple $100 just to set up that job, plus high per piece fees, because it took them just as much time to set up a 300-piece job as it did, a 100,000-piece job. So it just made it cost prohibitive. There's new technology that's available with what's called a virtual print driver. And think about it, if I was to print a letter, I would go file print on my computer and I would print it to my local printer. What these virtual print drivers do is I would go file print, and the printer list that comes up, one of those would be my virtual print driver, and up would pop my document, and it would ask me to control that print of that document to go to that third party who's going to be printing it and mailing it. And what those can do is, what it asks you to do is highlight the area where the address is, and are there additional attachments that you want to add, like a backup document or an extra PDF? And if it's a variable page printed document, what's the item inside the document that's unique that changes between one set to another? Like in this case, it might be an invoice number, or it could be a customer number, or it could be a page number on the bottom of the document. And then it basically sends that document directly into the workflow stream of that outsourced mail provider, allowing it to be seamlessly processed and commingled with other jobs so they can offer you postal discounts and lower volumes can be done. So it's a very exciting thing that's happening in mailing because it allows lower volume jobs to go into outsourced providers at lower costs and allows you to get postal discounts on things that you typically couldn't done. And it keeps mailings having to be manually processed in small sites that can't do it. And by the way, if this is interesting technology, this same type of technology could be used to move mail not to an outsourcer, but to an implant facility that you have inside your organization. So if you have this type of equipment in-house, the same technology could be used to send these documents to a workflow inside your organization so you could control the print yourself. Data management. This can be one of the hugest areas of costs. So in the following areas, what are the costs to accept the data files from, to accept the data files? For formatting the data to the vendor's workflows, for formatting the documents with your custom logic, for managing mail automation, processing with US compliance, emailing, faxing, texting your documents, image creation, storage of your files, and then if the outsource provider is managing sort of the web presentment of those stored images on customer portals. So so these are costs that are difficult to compare from one vendor to another because the jobs are different, but they're a really important segment to look at from one provider to another. What are you spending across these fees to make sure that you're getting the best rates and start to create some benchmarks? Let me give you a client example that we worked on. So this client was sending invoices and they were having their outsourcer do image creation, image storage, and the image storage is so they could basically have them presented on a web presentment system. They were spending 0.004 cents to create an image, a backup image of their document, another 0.004 on every stored image, because they were storing images for 24 months. They needed them to be accessible for the future. So they've been doing this for 5 years, and because they were keeping them for 24 months, they had 3.6 million stored images. So they send 75,000 invoices a month, which is 150,000 images because the average number of pages of an invoice was 2 pages. So they were spending $600 to create the images and then $14,000 a month to store the images, which ended up being $180,000 a year, or basically 20 cents per invoice mailed. And they had no idea they were spending this kind of quantity of funds on this. It was becoming their largest segment of cost for their mailings. We looked at it, we negotiated it, we worked on leverage for it, and we got the cost cut. So the image creation got down in this case to 0.002, and the image storage got down to 0.002. And we convinced them to change. Do they need 24 months of storage, or could 18 months be sufficient? And through this strategy, it saved them $133,000 a year and cut their cost by over 75%. So people don't, if you're not looking at it, you're missing those types of things. And this is not a huge mailer. They were only doing 75,000 invoices a month. Vendor strategies. So if you look at the chart to the left, to the right, you can see that this is the postal mail volumes defined by the USPS revenue pieces and weights and classes that's provided on the postal website. And these are the main mail classes that outsource mail providers run their mail through. And the reason I'm showing you this over the years is because what's happened over the past is, one, volumes have continually gone down. So every year, mail volumes are going down and the industry is shrinking and becoming more competitive. But even more important than that, when there are recessions, and we can look at in 2008, there was a recession, the mail volumes caught up with it in 2009 and went down 8% for first class and 20% for marketing mail. And the interesting thing is, you think, well, after the recession, the volumes will go back up. Well, in 2011, marketing mail went up a little bit. It went up 2%, but then went down 6% the next year. So historically, we don't see when mail volumes go away because of a recession, they don't come back. Last year, first class mail was down 2.4%, and marketing mail was down 18%. We're not expecting those volumes to go back up. What that means is there are more outsourced mail and print providers competing for a smaller pie of business. You have a lot more leverage negotiating rates with them because of these things. We recommend running an RFP, a request for a proposal, to find the best rates and service around your mailings. So the best way to do that, what we typically do in these scenarios, is we build a defined template where it's easy to compare rates on the main mail expenses. Okay, you have to make sure that there's a simple way for you to compare one service provider to another, because they're all going to try to provide all these extra value propositions that only they can do. But in truth, those can be relatively standardized. Include vendors that meet the following criteria. They can support your customers' geographic areas at the lowest cost. So this sounds obvious, but think about it this way. Let's say you're a local bank, you're a local hospital, a utility. You want to find local providers, local or regional providers that can do that mail. The last thing you want is, if you're in Boston, is having a mail house, and most of your customers are in the Northeast, is having a mail house that's in Texas, and then you have to wait for the mail delays of it moving all the way from Texas to Massachusetts. If your mail is nationwide, look for providers that are in the middle of the country or at desirable postal hubs that can reach the majority of the country in 2 to 3 days. There are lots of providers that you find in the Midwest for the reason that, they're near postal hubs. They have 2 to 3 day reaches. You're not going coast to coast, on your mail. So Texas, Ohio, Wisconsin, Illinois, Louisville, like these are places where there are lots of mail houses that sort of meet these types of requirements. They're close to a major pre-sort center. So you want to make sure that they're near, whether it's a Pitney Bowes facility or another major pre-sort hub, you want to make sure that they have links to those and are set up so you can get discounts on the items your mail service provider can't get discounts on. Are in low cost of living areas. The last thing you want is a mail house that's in New York City or in in the Northeast is one of the most expensive areas of the country. In certain parts of California can be some of the most expensive, other really expensive areas. You want places with low cost of living who can pay lower wages because that's what that area demands, and they can have lower costs. Have the highest level of technology to support your needs. This technology piece is a big deal. The bigger players have better technology. They can commingle multiple mailings into a single workflow. They can sometimes print the envelope on the fly in their work stream and actually wrap the pieces around, pieces of paper that they make in the envelopes. They have higher percentages of marketing mail they can forward to the sectional center facilities to get higher percentages of your mail forwarded to get better discounts. Like, they have those things. If you're splitting your mail jobs up amongst lots of different providers, you're missing out on some of those economies of scale the larger providers can provide. They specialize in the main classes of mail that is around you. Like, there are lots of providers that focus on banks, or they focus on utilities, or focus on mortgages, or there are providers that have a lot of experience in certain areas that can provide, basically extra value-added services you might need. Compare the responders on request and request references. Make sure that you get other clients. People are usually very happy to be references, and if they have a hard time providing those references, then that should be a red flag. What is their account management processes in customer service for customer service and issue resolution? So you need to, if you're doing a lot of projects with these people, you want to make sure that you have someone who can support you in the long run, that can be a partner in this area. And look for discounts by consolidating higher volumes of mail into fewer suppliers. We do not recommend having relationships with 10 or 20 different providers. You should have a couple that are your main providers that you can hold more accountable, and you can leverage those volumes for better discounts. Marketing agencies and consolidators. So these services, what they do is they act as your soup to nuts, one source, one throat to choke around your marketing mailings. And they're great, and they primarily focus on the creative, but then they have relationships with third-party mail print and mail providers, and they manage the whole process for you. This is fine if you're doing ad hoc work, or it's not like a huge part of your mail spends. But if you're doing a lot of this work and a lot of this marketing spend, is this the greatest opportunity? Think about, are you getting the best rates? Like, are they giving you the best mailing rates and service levels? Are you getting any economies of scale, or are they splitting this work amongst multiple providers? Do you have any control over the mailing, or is it really you just get a bill at the end for what happened? Do you have any visibility to the fees that are being charged, aggregated on billing, or is it just aggregated on billing summaries? And are you sure that you're getting the best services available? So we have a client that we're working with today, and they're doing about $25 million in spend of permit mail going through these basically marketing agencies and consolidators. And the problem is they have zero visibility to anything that they're doing about it. And these marketing agencies are splitting this work amongst 15 different outsource providers at random times using different ones because they're sort of, bidding these out on a job by job basis. And the companies that they're using, these outsource providers they're using, aren't necessarily the biggest providers where you can be assured you're getting the best rates in any of the, the economies of scale that we talked about before. So as a solution, we recommend, use the marketing agencies for creative, but if you're doing a decent enough volume, manage the output and the relationships with these outsource providers on your own. By combining mailings under one agreement, you can be assured you're getting the best services at the lowest rates. You can customize the service to what is needed from a print, mail, and retention strategy. Higher levels of vendor support due to the size and scope of the relationship. And larger mailers, like we talked about, have higher levels of automation and can provide you lower postage rates. The difference between what the big players and the small players can offer, in many cases, is very significant as far as being able to provide you the lowest rates. Once you have those relationships in place, the relationship needs to be managed for the future. So that is, do you have access to the vendor portal to be able to access the mailings? Do you have visibility to all the invoices? Is there an auditing process of those invoices? Looking for billing errors. Like if they're not billing you with the right rates, you're entitled to refunds. Oftentimes these things don't get, vendors make mistakes in the way they code things. Like, is anyone checking that to make sure it's at the right rates? Most master service agreements with third-party outsource providers are going to have the penalty fees for service failures. Is anyone monitoring those service failures to making sure you're getting the credits? Expense is if you're not putting them into some sort of documented process like we described where you're coding the different areas, how do you know when expense areas get above documented thresholds? And how do you know what to work on to get cost savings? And then how do you budget for postage increases? The post office is having one postage increase already in January, and there's discussions this summer about having a huge, like 5 to 7% postage rate increase again, because the post office has some unused rate authority that they can take advantage of. So how do you budget for that if you don't have this regular relationship and review process? Set up quarterly reviews that define the changes, develop new strategies for the future, and then ongoing meetings to move enhancements forward. So in summary, gain visibility to these outsourced mailings. It's the most important step. If you don't have the visibility, you can't manage it. Audit the invoices and benchmark the service levels and fees to make sure that you're getting the best value. Look for savings across every area of spend. We went over 3 that we view as the biggest, but every area from like mail preparation to shipping costs to across the board, there are going to be savings the more research and work you do into it. Run an RFP to develop a master service agreements with the fewest suppliers possible, and then set up continual review to further optimize the category. But most importantly, record your results through this managed program because the savings are going to be larger than you expect. And by having a sort of a framework to manage this, it's going to make it easier in the future to be able to drive further savings. So we do this type of education for clients because we find it's the best way to, one, to educate the industry. We feel like there isn't a ton of postal education that's out there, and 2, to give you a sense to hear like what we have to offer and the things that we do. You can use the things that we teach you on these things on your own by all means, but hopefully there are things that you find that we can offer some value with. Today, like we've been in business now for 10 years. We're managing the largest mailing fleet in the world of about 150,000 pieces of mailing equipment. And from those relationships, we dive into other areas like outsourced mail, print, pre-sort, shipping, and different things that we help our clients with. Our average client savings has been $1.9 million. On the equipment side, we average 59% savings, which is our biggest category. We have 220 years of experience, vendor-based experience. And we've also recovered over $20 million in lost postage, vendor overcharges, and fees. But we feel that we're very good at this. We make this easy for our clients, and we act as subject matter experts that can help anytime mail issues arise. Our clients are across all industries. Frankly, it doesn't make any difference what industry. Our clients are typically just have fragmented mail spends across lots of locations and divisions and areas where it's helpful for them to have someone keep it together. If you're a single location and that's all you have and you're managing everything yourself, you may not need us. But if you're a large organization that has lots of locations and fragmented mail spends, that's where we really shine. What we do for every client, no matter who it is we do some sort of, some sort of analysis of their mail spends, looking at what things that we find across all areas. So whether it's equipment, whether it's postage, whether it's, outsourced mail spends, UPS, FedEx, we'll do those analyses for you, show you what savings are available, and then from that, we'll show you like a plan that we'll build to how to implement that type of strategy, where you can, view us as a partner and see if it makes sense to move forward. And if you do those things, we'll negotiate prices, and then we'll help audit and manage these categories. Most importantly, we don't decide on anything. We manage all of the detail. We come to you for all approvals on everything that happens inside your mail spends. We manage it in a web dashboard so you have full visibility at a much more granular level than you've ever had, that we maintain for you and give you access. And then mail spends, it'd be great if everything happened at one point in time and then was over, but that's really not the reality of how it works, especially in large organizations. So we continually manage the category for you, continually manage the dashboards, work with your vendors, audit invoices, work directly with locations on their needs, and make sure the category has the highest level of support that we can provide. So we run these webinars frequently on different topics. Please come, and each one will be of different, we try to rotate them and make them of different areas that we find savings for people. We want to thank you to come into this one, and we'll keep you informed when there are more content that are out there and different sessions that we're having. But I want to open it up to any questions. And again, I really appreciate everybody being on the call today.